Okay, I ran out of time on the last video again, but it got me thinking about my, I finished doing the pleats on the back of the skirt on both sides, and then to save time, I went ahead and put in my side seams. I wasn't even thinking about the pattern of the fabric, and I should have been, because now when you look down the sides of my pattern, you see how it's not even matching on either side. I should have taken my pattern. This side looks a little better than the other, but I should have taken my pattern and lined up my, just like wallpaper, I should have lined up my fabric. So I thought, in case you're going to use something like this rose pattern, you might want to make sure that your lines line up perfectly. So the way I do it, I'm not sure how most people do it, but when I'm dealing with a pattern like that where I want things to match up on both sides, the easiest way for me to do it, before I cut my pattern out, I fold my seam allowances down, and then I pick a point on the pattern where I want to, say this is my full sheet of fabric, right? I pick a point on my pattern where I want that to line up with the other side. So because this is an easy one, I'm going to pick that point right in the middle of the triangle there, and I'm going to line up my fabric. Okay, but then when I cut it, I'm going to cut it with my, I'm going to cut it out with my of course, that seam line down. That's how I'm going to cut it. I just do it this way right now so I can determine where I want that point to be. So let's just go ahead. This is just scrap fabric, so I'm just going to take a pencil and mark where I line that up on this piece of fabric. Okay, so that would be my cutout piece of fabric on this piece. Okay, so now I'm going to take my front piece and do the same thing. I'm going to fold my fold line, and I'm going to find that same spot on the other side of the fabric, in that same dot in that corner, or wherever you're going to pick that design out at. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that, and then I'm going to open up my seam, and then I'm going to cut it out. Okay, I'm just doing that to mark my location of where I want to put that pattern piece. Okay, so I'm just going to put pencil again so you can see what I mean on here. But of course, you wouldn't do this with real, if you're doing it for real. Okay, I did it the wrong way. Let me do it this way so you can see them line up. So let's go ahead and do, this would be this side of the fabric. Line that up and draw your lines. Okay, so even though my seam's going to be coming out here, by the time I sew it, same with this one here, by the time I sew it, those two seams are going to, so let's just say this is a seam right here. Okay, let me do it this way so you can see it from the front. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and match these two lines up, and like I'm making a seam on the sew it. Well, I'll just go ahead and sew it. So let's go ahead and cut that out and line those seams up. Okay, so this was our actual piece of fabric. So let me do this one here, and I had to do it on the opposite side. Okay, so this was my sew line is here, and my pattern piece was here. It doesn't matter on the top, it's just your side seams you're worried about. Okay, so well, you do have to match that point on the top too. So let's go ahead and sew this like this was a real, like you were really sewing this on your sewing machine. Okay, so do your regular seam allowance, whatever it would happen to be. Okay, I wasn't perfect, but you get the idea. At least that would look a lot, I did a too big of a seam allowance. But you get the idea where if I would have followed it, been more careful, I would have got that as my side seam and it would have been a perfect. I just didn't go in far enough on my seam. Let me try it again. Okay, so that's what your pattern would look like if you lined it up like I just did on the side of your dress. So you'd get a perfect, it would be perfect. You wouldn't have this mismatch on either side. But I'm not going to do it again, so it's just going to have to stay that way for me. But if you do have a pattern like that, definitely line up your front and back pieces so you will get this on your side seams. Otherwise, it's going to look like mine is, and it could look a lot nicer. Okay, so so like I said, I finished the last video, and I had just finished putting in those back seams. Now this is where you're going to have that little in the back seam where we had this pleat here that came down. This is what it looks like after it's been all pleated. You've got that little thing right there like that. So I did my side seams, I overlocked them, so now we're ready to attach the skirt to the bodice, which is, what step are we at? We're back down to make the gown part. So we are at step number 20. Okay, now I just did a, on the front of here, I just did a overlock stitch. I didn't do any sewing down on that. And it looks to me that's what the instructions want you to do, because this is all going to match right into your top of your dress. Okay, so first we're going to do is we're going to take the bodice and we're going to match our seams. We're going to go and do the whole thing to make sure that our seams fit, because if our seams do not fit, we are going to have to take out some of those seams. So the easiest way to do this is to go to your side seams and match up your side seams. I am pushing my seams to the back, so let's go ahead and line up our side seams. I hope you can see this. Okay, so there's one side seam. Put a pin in it. Okay, and then we're going to take this little diamond that's in the back of your bodice, and we're going to line that up directly in the middle of that middle dart that we did in the very center back of that piece of fabric. But you'll notice that we're going to have to sew here to the dart back and then come and sew this part, because there is that little diamond that we're going to have to get around. Okay, so let's go ahead and just put a pin in there. That'll be where we're going to hit the middle. And this one is going to be pushed to the back. Okay, so let's put another pin here. According to the instructions, it says to pin it all the way across. What I did is I sewed one side at a time. And then I came back and I also picked up this little, see how you've got this diamond here and then you've got this diamond here. Together they'll fit together, but when you sew them, you're going to have to sew them. What I did is I just went straight flush on this side. I stopped here and then I came back and did the rest. So we're not going to sew this little thing here. We're not going to sew this one. We're just going to sew across to the middle back. So let's go ahead and get those lined up. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a pin, like you're going down 1/4 of an inch. Let's put a pin here and see where you're going to end up on the other side. So basically that's where you're going to end up. That's exactly where you want to end up, because what I ended up doing was doing a little clip here and came back and turned it the opposite way to sew that other piece. So let's go ahead and put our pin in there, and that's where we're going to sew. We are going to sew from our pin to the center back. So that center back is also going to be 1/4 of an inch right here, so that when we turn it over, we are right in the middle of that center seam dart. So see how I'm going to sew right to that center seam dart? I hope you can see that on the video. But this is where we're going to sew. So we're only going to sew part of the side. We're not going to do the front. Forget the front facing. Okay, so let me go back to my regular stitch, and we're going to just put that seam in right here. Okay, so I already got my first pin marked, so let's go ahead and put your pin here and do a couple back stitches right till you get to that pin. Okay, so now we're just going to go forward. Make sure that you pull all of your fabric out of the way underneath. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and let's just keep going. Okay, so make sure your darts are out of the way. Keep going. Okay, more. Okay, and then we're going to get to that pin, to the center of that dot, to the back piece, and we're going to stop. So I'm just going to go one more stitch, two more, and then back. Let's see if I got far enough on there. Okay, so let's see if I'm right in the center of that back. I didn't go far enough. I've got to go put a couple more stitches in there, which is fine with me. I'll go ahead and do that now. Yeah, I was too far. I was a couple stitches too close, too little. Okay. Okay, I'm right there. See where the center seam is? And I'm right there on that. So now I'm going to turn this the opposite way and do the other side. So this is where we're at. So we haven't sewn our front here, and we've matched up our side seams. Do you see how that is? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to turn around, and now we're going to do the other side. So far so good. Those darts are working perfect. I didn't have to make any adjustments. So let's go ahead and match up our side seams again. So I'm pushing everything to the back. I did that on the first one too. Okay, so that we'll put a pin here. I don't want to run out of time again. I'm not sure how much I have left. I think I have enough time. Okay, so now where this turned, we're going to turn it a little bit. Let me see if it's easier to see it on this side. Okay, so now we're going to take that where we were at, and we're going to turn it, and we're going to sew in the opposite direction. So as far as our darts go, we want to make sure that our darts stay in place underneath that turn. So let's turn it up like we would normally do it. It's not going to let you do it until you're finished. Let's see how we happen to do it this way. Here's my middle back. There is that. And there's that middle seam. I stopped here, and then I picked up again here, and then I just sewed on in that direction. All right, let's just do it the way, let's just sew it. Okay, this one's getting turned this way. Okay, so that's what I did. So I'm just going to pucker a little bit right here in the back. So just go like this when you get ready to sew it. Let me lay all your puckers down, all your pleats down in the back so you don't catch them by mistake. Okay, so let's see. Let's just put a pin in there and see if that helps. Okay, so next seam is going to be from the middle back to that same place in front. So we're going to line up that front square where we're going to have that match with those front seams. I'm probably making this look a lot harder than it is. Once you sew this, you're going to see how easy, well, not easy, but you're going to see how everything fits together. There you go with that middle dart going right in the middle of that front facing. You put a pin in it, you'll find out you're exactly 1/4 of an inch from that front facing. And you're right in the middle of it. So let's go ahead and put a pin there. And that will be our stop point. Okay, so start and stop. And this is what the back looks like. Just make sure all your pleats are laying flat. If they're not, then put a pin in it. Okay, so that's how we're going to sew it. See how that one I got a little up there? Let's move that out and see if we can get that to lay flatter. Okay, so there is your back skirt, and this is where your bodice is. Center back, 2 facing. Let's give it a sew. Okay, I'm going to put my needle, my machine right down on top of that stitching. Do a couple stitches, back stitch a couple, and then start sewing. Okay, make sure your skirt's out of the way. Okay, I'm going to sew right up to that pin and do a couple back spaces, back stitches. Okay, so there we go. I think I'm going to have to stop right here and then come back and pick up the facings. So let's see what it looks like on the back. Okay, so there's 1, and there's 2. And that looks like it might have got caught a little bit. I'll have to see what, nope, it's fine. Yep, okay. So that is the back of the bodice. Okay, so I'll come back and then we'll do the facings.